Hi, Austin. Thank you so much for your patience in waiting for this feedback. Or maybe you didn't have patience, but in any regards, here we go. Um, First of all, I want to compliment you on having a really good focus on in this essay about literacy. I have to say, you really surprised me. I wasn't thinking that the essay was going in the direction that it did in the first part of it. And the ending of your essay is really very powerful and very personal, and such a good story, and one that I know is common to other students. So I hope that you find an occasion to share this in some other way. I wish if we were in a face-to-face class, this would be one of those ones I would want to have read out loud because I know that you're not alone. Um, I do want to just kind of guide you through what I've done. So you're going to see different color markings in here. These reddish marks are things that probably need to be fixed or have some awkwardness or needs some clarity or more explanation. Sometimes it's grammar and sometimes it's just sentence structure. The green highlights indicate things that I am pushing together as main ideas or important ideas in each of the paragraphs. I've tried to at least grab one or two ideas, and if I don't find one in there, then that's something to notice. If you have more than one going on in there, then that's also something to notice. Um, and so there are a lot of green points because the focus is very strong, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to go back to the top here and just kind of go through this with you a little bit, hit on the most important aspects of it. Um, so first of all, overall, you have a very conversational tone in your writing, which is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in the sense that it makes your reading very accessible, and it feels like you're sitting in the room having a conversation with me. On the other hand, from an academic standpoint, it's too casual. You are employing some language use that you would only find in conversation and not find in academic writing. And so what we need to do is have you clean that up a little bit. And a lot of these red marks are focusing on that particular issue because I find that to be the biggest maybe I guess problem with your essay is that it becomes a little too conversational, a little too informal. And so we want to kind of strike a medium ground place if we can. So on a basic note, whenever you write a book title like Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves or the Magic Treehouse series, you always are going to italicize those titles. The rule used to be that you would put them in bold and underline them, but we don't do that anymore. MLA has changed, so I put that note over here. Um, and then you end this sentence here that your love for books began to disintegrate. And I asked before I got to the end of the essay, I felt like that was the controlling statement of this first paragraph. I guess you could call it your thesis if you want to, but it's not specific enough. And I'm going to scroll really fast down to the end. So when I come to the end here and you talk about all of the problems that you went through, um, I think that you need to kind of give the reader a little bit of a hint that you had no idea what was to come. So when you say something like this, my love for books began to disintegrate at about the same time that my life began to disintegrate or my life began to personally fall apart. You don't need to go into a lot of detail, but there is a real correlation with literacy and with stress and with things that are happening in our personal lives with our family members. And I think that that is a very well-known fact amongst educators is that things that happen at home very most definitely impact students' learning. And I think that's what you're getting at here. And so my love for books disintegrated as my personal life began to fall apart. And then we can go into the rest of the story. You don't have to add a lot. Um, the earliest memory of reading. Okay, so I would say my earliest memory of reading is the book Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, and this is when you go through and talk about it. Now, I've circled these U's. This is that conversational part. We never use second person pronouns in academic essays. So that becomes too conversational and it's too personal. It's too informal. So what we want to do is kind of change that. And this is kind of how I play around with it. I'm just going to take a couple of sentences and show you kind of how I work it out if this was my writing. So this book had this book, maybe I carried this book with me everywhere, and I made everyone read it to me, period. Um, if somebody skipped, if my parent, whoever was reading to you, was it your parents, your grandmother? So if my grandma or my mom skipped a couple of words just to get through the book faster, I noticed. I had the book memorized verbatim. Does that make sense? And if they skipped words while they read to me, I would make them go back and restart. And that's how you get through all those U's, okay? Um, and then I highlighted this part right here because this would be a really great place for you to use dialogue and when you instead of telling us about what you and your grandmother said, you could have this be a conversation, and that dialogue is one of the requirements of a narrative, so that would work out really well. And then at 7 years, that's that conversational thing. When I was 7, I was introduced to the Magic Tree House series. Period. These books became the new Alibaba, and Jack and Annie, the main characters, were okay. This is a fragment. So, and Jack and Annie, the main characters, Jack and Annie, went on incredible missions traveling around the world and through time. Okay, so we want to clean that up, and then all through Magic Tree House, I loved these books. Okay, so that's conversational. I read the entire series. I loved these books. Something that would be more formal. When I read capitalized Magic Tree House books, I always felt that I was there on the adventures, or I would even start to imagine my own adventures. And so over here, I made a comment that, how did these experiences define you? I mean, did you have a big imagination as a child? Were you adventurous? I mean, it sounds like as you were reading and having these experiences that your childhood was fairly alive and typical of a lot, like, the kind of childhood that we might expect people to have, where kids are playful and imaginative and having a good time, and maybe stress and worry free in your case, that you had space for imagination because there wasn't a lot of things that were awful, at least that you noticed. And then when you turned, now you've got a discrepancy here. You talk about turning 10 or 12 here, and then at the end you talk about turning 11. I think we need to make sure that we're using the same timeline so that we're not confusing the reader. After um, between my 10th and 12th between my 10th and 12th year, I stopped having an interest in reading, especially in school. I stopped having an interest in reading, especially in school. Period. I did not want to have to read something of no interest to me. Now, here's that conversational thing. That's how that next sentence is all read. Don't get me wrong. I could read perfectly fine. It's just the very last thing I ever wanted to do. Okay. Now, the thing that I want you to think about is this whole paragraph this is where you surprised me, is that you are kind of painting the picture of you just being like a typical middle schooler, or that pre-teenager who's just like more into maybe playing sports or starting to get interested in the opposite sex, or just being interested in relationships, things like that. And then we come here to cold, scared, worried, alone, and depressed during 6th grade. And so I wonder if there's some correlation that we can do, or that you can do, to make these paragraphs go together and have that turning point. Because what you are introducing here is that you went from this carefree kind of imaginative period in your life to this right here in the matter of sounds like a year or so. And so I'm just thinking, from a reader standpoint, if you could somehow combine the two paragraphs together, or maybe reverse the order of them. So, by the time I turn between my 10th and 12th year, I stopped having an interest to read, period. I stopped having an interest in school, period. It wasn't because I was dumb or that I couldn't learn, but it was because my life at home had started to fall apart. And so I became very possessive over the books that I had, right? I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me as a reader that you are possessive of those books and not wanting to pass them out and hand them out to others because they were your safety net. And even cracking them open maybe even opens up some kind of a painful um, memory for you, and that of how life wasn't the way it used to be. I don't know. I might be overreading it, but I just feel like there's so much more in there. And then when you get to this next part, it really would make a lot more sense because you're turning the reader to say, okay, it's not just that I just became a flake and a procrastinator, but there were reasons, there were forces at play in my life that made reading just seem so uninteresting because my choices were taken from me without my permission, you know? And so by the end of that same school year, then not only did your dad and mom to get divorced, but you also were going to have to lose your home, your childhood home, which is another loss. And then you had this piece here, you had no friends, you lost your friends, you lost your interest in sports, you lost your interest in learning, and you became disconnected. And you started to do worse and worse in school, on papers and reading assignments. And by the end of eighth grade, you found yourself having to choose classes for your freshman year. So then I think a good transition for between these two would be that you saw this as an opportunity for a fresh start. What was I thinking? Instead of saying that conversationally, you might say something more like, I realized that I had an opportunity to start over. And so signing up for my freshman courses, and I don't know what pre-AP is. I'm thinking you're talking about honors English. I decided to sign up for honors English. The summer following my eighth grade year, I was instructed to read To Kill a Mockingbird, Remember You, italicized book titles for my new fancy freshman English class. Now, this is a fragment, days go by. You have to say, the days went by, comma, and I didn't even pick the book up, period. And you want to take this off, I had become very big on, okay, so I have become, so we want to make sure our verbs are, we're following the same tenses. So I had become very big with procrastination, period. Finally, 2 weeks before school started and my paper and reading were due, my grandmother came over and read the entire book with me, period. We read it, but I I'm stumped. I don't understand why I have. Okay, but you know, I didn't enjoy it. You can just simplify it. I didn't enjoy reading that stupid old book. I gave no effort. And so my grandmother gave in and bought me the Cliff Notes book to help me understand it better. Clearly, I just didn't care. Okay? So even though you were trying to make this fresh start, you still had a hard time. And then things got worse. The week before school started, things got worse. Okay? And then you go into this car accident. It wasn't until I dropped out of high school during my senior year that I began to see the mistakes that I was making and how they would impact my life. And that's when things began to change. And that's when your dad became this great inspiration and your mom became, I mean, what a great ending to the story that you guys, through all the stuff that you've been through, have managed to be able to stay healthy and intact in your lives. And so I think that literacy is very defining in your world. I think this is an excellent essay. I hope that you can really see yourself as a very mature and thoughtful writer. The grammar pieces and the sentence structure and the conversational tone are incidental problems that are easy to fix if you choose to, but your message is powerful. It's one of these essays that I feel like could be published if you chose to do so. Thanks so much, Austin, and I hope that you are able to put the final draft out okay, and I'll talk to you later.